Welcome to the audio commentary track for The Serpent and the Rainbow. I'm Rob Galuzzo from Icons of Fright and the Killer POV podcast, and I'm thrilled and excited to be sitting with the star of this film, Mr. Bill Pullman. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Rob.
How are you, man?
Good.
This is so fun. This is a really interesting and unique film, both in Wes Craven's career, but also in yours, because primarily up until this point, you had been doing a lot of comedies. You were just coming off of Ruthless People and Spaceballs, and then this. So how did this happen for you? I mean, were you getting called in for a lot of comedy stuff, and you wanted to do something different, or how did this happen?
Well, it's just in the nature of how careers start in. You're looking for traction any way you can, and I had auditioned for a small part in Ruthless People, got it. Mel Brooks saw that and somehow got excited about getting me into Spaceballs. And so I think there was a tracking of this movie was being put together, and they were looking for an unknown person to be the lead, And I think some of it was luck of timing and everything that I became part of that mix, and then got offered the part, and then did auditions with different actresses, get prepared. But, at that point, I thought, my goodness, this is a great business. Such an adventure. I thought, if it's going to be like one after another of these, I'm going to have a very rich life. And really, I don't think any other movie I've done has been as adventurous as this one.
I know that they started shooting in Haiti, I believe, but there was a lot of issues and problems, which we'll get into a little bit later, and then they had to move to the Dominican Republic. So were you there for a lot of the Haiti stuff? I mean, was a good chunk of the shoot done there?
Yeah, I maybe not the best one to say, but I don't think the production schedule changed that much. It was good timing that our transition to Dominican Republic was happening when it happened, but I don't think we had to change too much of the shooting. But we started pre-production in Haiti, and there were quite a few people who had done a lot of work there by the time I got there, and the production design was incredibly intricate and very authentic. There's a lot in this movie that it was based on a real dedication on the part of the creative team to be accurate.
Right. I only mention the Haiti stuff now because it looks like a lot of this opening footage. I've read stories that they brought on as many extras as humanly possible, and Wes tells a funny story that the extras essentially revolted at one point because they were all getting paid a quarter a piece, and then they were like, wait a minute, they brought more of their villagers in and started demanding more money until the point that I think it was David Ladd, the producer, had to have a jet full of money flown in so that they wouldn't get killed by all these extras.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of that was a complication of trying to get a movie made without much of an infrastructure, and
right.
So a lot of the controversy that happened with the extras was because traditionally mulattoes were the power structures, and so the dark black Haitians really always felt second-class citizens, and the film company, just out of who's talking, who's returning my calls, put into place this PA system, productions assistants who were all mulattoes, and there was this tension that happened because of that, and it was also happening at a time where we had 2,000 extras, and the only access to this area was through one dirt road. So
right.
There was no secondary, if we got blocked coming out, we wouldn't get out of this place that we were in. So it was pretty scary, and things happened pretty quickly. And
there was a lot of political turmoil at that point too. I mean, some of that has been filtered into some of the fictional characters in this movie. But I mean, were you aware of that before you went to Haiti? Like, kind of what was going on there? Politically?
Well, it was it was like the halcyon days of the political structure, because I think, Baby Doc had been removed, and so there was a feeling that the dictatorship had ended. But as we've seen from the Arab uprising and all that, usually that portends incredible chaos. And there was a general in charge at that time named Namfi, and it seemed as though he was a strong man that could keep order on the place. And we were doing this filming in the spring of '87, and by the fall of '87, during the first election cycle, is when more brutality became evident and things got very nasty. So it was a quiet period in a way. So we lucked out.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Now let's go back a little bit. How familiar were you with Wes Craven at that point? Because he'd already done Nightmare on Elm Street, huge hit. And I think he would just finish Deadly Friend, but he wasn't exactly, I don't think he was the quote-unquote master of horror that we know today. It was still early in his career. So were you familiar with things like Nightmare, or did you just meet him and talk to him in person?
Well, I wasn't really familiar with the full range of horror. It wasn't like I was a horror freak or something.
That's me.
That's you, Rob. But I was really intrigued to meet with him and hear he by that time had become very invested in it. And this is always the case with Wes. You imagine a certain kind of person from knowing about the movies and seeing the titles and the one sheets, but when you meet him, he's soft-spoken, extremely intelligent, incredibly caring, and very, at that point, very invested too in and got more so in the culture and wanting to make a film that wasn't as sensationalistic as his others. He really wanted to make a sophisticated story.
Right. No, I mean, he's often compared to like a film professor, which I think is a pretty accurate assessment of what he's like in person. So let me ask you, obviously this is based on a book by Wade Davis and is very loosely, the movie takes liberties because it's cinematic, but very loosely based on his book. When you got this part, were you going from the script? Did you go back to the book? Because I know later on you became pretty good friends with Wade.
Yeah, well, Wade was there right from the beginning, and he was very active, and he's an extremely curious guy. He's and his interest in trying to make the movie as best as he could, I think, was what was compelling him to be around during the making of it. And there was so much in terms of my preparation. He helped me a lot because he had access to a lot of people and ceremonies around Haiti, around Cape Haitian, where we did the initial pre-production and shooting. And I think Wade is somebody who has incredible interest in new things, and watching the anthropology of filmmaking was an interesting thing to hear his breakdown of what the culture of filmmaking is from an anthropologist's, ethnobotanist's kind of point of view.
Wow.
But we did go together to some ceremonies that were extremely powerful and incredibly memorable, and I think I'm not sure whether I think for him, the process of writing the book and being involved with Haitian culture and being kind of put up there and constantly a go-to guy with asking questions about Haiti for that, particularly in that 10-year period. And I think he's kind of easing away from that. He has so many other interests, and he got kind of a little pigeonholed as the voodoo guy, zombie guy. Right.
Now, did you, when preparing the character, because it's loosely based on him, did you, how do you prep as an actor? Did you take any, any subtleties or influences from him and kind of work them in, or did you create this from scratch as your own thing?
No, he's a day younger than I am, I think, but, so he's so similar, and there was so much compatibility right away that I really appreciated, his ability to become very intimate with people who have secrets they haven't shared is a part of his magic. He is, as a personality, was extremely important to watch and see how he did that, since my character had to do that. He's open, he's respectful, he's entirely, he honors the culture and the people, and so everybody that I met through him thought very highly of him. And, it was a tricky time in Haiti, and Haiti is a very tricky country, to understand what you're actually seeing. And as he talks about in the book, there you can endlessly be kind of puzzled by what conclusions you think you can draw.
Now, I got to ask this because coming up in a few minutes here, it looks like you take a hell of a tumble down down the side of a hill, and there's a lot of little stunt scenes like that. It looks like that's you. So how much of your own physical work, because I feel like this early in your career, you seem like the type of guy that'd be like, I could do this. But I don't know. I was worried when I was revisiting this recently that maybe you did a lot of your own stunts.
Yeah, well, it was a kind of, studio concerns about, your own ability. But this scene particularly, this is, some of these shots are taken from having an IMO a little small camera that's put on my chest. So
right.
I was essentially loaded up, rigged up by John Lindley, the DP, and then with this rig on myself so that the camera angle would just get my face, but I could do 360 turns and I could run in any direction and it would be filmed and they'd cut it in later. So
see, this is what I'm talking about, because this is one really long take.
Yeah.
So that's really you that took that.
That's me. Yeah.
That took that dive.
That's a real leaf hanging on my head right there. Yeah.
I mean, I noticed because there's no cuts and we're here for a considerable amount of time. And
look at that sweat. You see this sweat there? This was, there were scenes in this sequence which was, they because of circumstances, you're moving so quickly. We got out in parts of the forest sometimes, and at one point I remember a makeup person was spraying hairspray on my chest. I said, "What are you doing?" She had run out of water, and we were so far from anything, and all of a sudden this inky, stretchy, this curly, sticky stuff was on me. So
right,
that was symptomatic of how we were. It was a studio movie, but it was also gunning and pretty fast. Right.
I'd like to think that these Boston scenes are the most comfortable that you were during the entire shoot. Not anywhere near a jungle or...
Yeah, that's true. It's very nice to shoot in Boston in that period.
And what about some of these actors? Because, right here we have, Michael Goff is I love Michael Goff. I'm a big fan of him, and he's got a lot of history to him. And, was it, what were some of these other actors like?
Paul Guilfoyle.
Yeah.
Excellent actor, yeah.
Yeah, were you familiar with these guys? And
no, Michael Goff I had known from his stage work, in English. And Paul I knew from New York. He's also a New York actor.
Oh.
But I had never met a lot of the others who I've remained friends with. Brent Jennings remains a good friend, and Zakes Mokae was really an interesting guy that I enjoyed his company during the making of the movie. I saw him a few times after it. So and he was probably the most fascinating actor I'd ever seen. He had been persecuted in South Africa.
Yeah.
And his whole experience there really was a first-hand encounter with the evil that a man can do to a man. And I think that him being hung by his ankles outside a 7-story building and asked questions and all of that made him incredibly available to, the tonton macoute aspect of the film, in the sense of bullies being, warlords over population and intimidating. And I always remember Zakes going, we would get our per diem, and he would just walk out to the gates of the compound each once a week, and there would always be people that were looking for handouts that were out there, and he would just take his per diem and give it away.
Wow, that's amazing. When you met him on the shoot of this, because technically he's kind of your, dare I say, nemesis or the villain of it. But I've read Wes say what a genuinely sweet man he was. And again, you mentioned some of the stuff that he went through in South Africa. I think he lost his brother during all that as well. Was this the kind of stuff that you talked about when you met him initially, or was that much later once you got to know him? Because I feel like he brings all those experiences to the way he plays the character, because he's doing it from experience, being on the other end.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah, very good that way. And it was definitely, he didn't share it easily, but eventually it came out.
Wow. Yeah. So here they're talking about how they want you to go back because the Christoph character played by Conrad Roberts, who is thought to be dead is walking around, and they want to know what it is that brought him back. That they want you to find the powder and stuff. Now, I read a little bit about this, and maybe you could fill in the blanks, but it's loosely, from Wade's book, it's loosely inspired by Clairvius Narcissi, who was part of a family. I think unlike Christoph, the real guy had done a lot of reprehensible things, and that's kind of why they put this. I guess it's tetrodotoxin.
Tetrodotoxin.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They used this on him, which makes you appear to be dead, and then they buried him alive and brought him back. And in that sense, they could kind of. I guess once you go through that experience, people can control what you do from then on. So how much do you know about the real guy that inspired this?
I've never met him or anything, and I think that was part of what made it. It's the first time that someone who had been declared dead by an American doctor turned out to be alive, and so that was what sent up the signal and got the attention. But and then Wade infiltrated the secret society, and with the Bokur, who was a shaman type person who concocts things from natural ingredients and in the dark of night over a 3-4 day period, and Wade infiltrated that and got that information. But it's controversial, and there is a lot about the way the poisons are used that Wade makes a very articulate analysis of what the role of magic is and what the importance of a belief system in order for these things to work. I mean, it's not just pharmacology. It's another layer that I think Wade's understanding of that is part of his brilliance, because he senses that, you have to have someone who's susceptible to believing that he is a zombie in a way for it to work. And in their incredible, in folk culture of poisons, it's incredibly variable. That they present it as if it's a certainty that they can make this thing happen. But the ingredients from the Bufo marinus, the frog, the poisonous frog of the datura, and it's a combination of which is a plant, and a combination of all those things. If you vary it, you can kill somebody. They become brain dead, and so the ability to certainly turn someone who could go into a deep state of anestheticism or be anesthetized to a certain state, and then brought back is kind of wasn't easily to calibrate, and so that made for a lot of discussion about how it's done and everything. But there's definitely, I think that was seminal work that Wade did and got praised eventually. There was criticism, about
initially,
him. Because his methods were probably not as locked down scientific as. There's always going to be some members of the scientific community that object, but most of that kind of went away as people began to really appreciate what he'd done.
Right. I think it's interesting you mentioned how it's a combination of things, including the influence of the people around you, because I've not just through Wade, but I've read interviews with Wes saying, "Oh, I know this."
That's my wife.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
She did not want to do that. Put that needle through that guy's face.
That's not a special effect. That's the real deal, right?
Yeah. This also, got some. This is a very interesting thing with Paul Winfield having been this kind of, commercialized voodoo, and that was part of what the scene was that Wade went into with. People making money with tourism, getting these things to happen. But there was quite a bit of, that shooting of that night was actually quite wild because they did prepare for it as they needed to. In order to him to be at the state where he could have a needle pushed through his cheeks,
right?
He really had to be possessed. So the shooting was kind of all night long and waiting for these very certain moments. And once it started to happen, then it was over in like 40 minutes or something.
Right. I think Wes talks a lot about how again, the influence of people like being in Haiti and how how much they can influence your behavior. Maybe this scene, I think it's this scene. In the actual story, he said he was having dinner in Haiti at one of these type of events, and a woman, completely unaware, just like came up to him and took his glass and started eating it in front of him, and like he like couldn't believe what he was seeing. Now later in the movie, there's a scene like that, but I feel it's like here, like because I know this one actress is just got hit with that dust, so now she's dancing, and then in the next day she's unaware of what she had done. It's just like the idea that they can, use these people are very open to influence and not remembering it, which I think is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, did you? These guys like Wes and I believe David Ladd went to go visit like voodoo priests and stuff, and I read that they were nervous at first shooting in Haiti, so they went and tried to get like I guess some sort of blessing of some sort, which sounds crazy. I mean, did you partake in any of that? Did you meet with any real voodoo priests and talk to them about this stuff?
Oh yeah. I got there after they had done the blessing ceremony,
okay.
Which that's kind of common practice. I think when you're in these cultures, it's not only because you believe that it will protect you, but it's also to show respect to the culture, and that blessing is important for everyone who participates, who is indigenous to feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so that part of it was there. And David had done a lot of work when it was very interesting. This act of possession is something that is a big part of this movie and was for me really interesting because it's a very theatrical kind of idea that you see someone possessed by a spirit, but it's all kind of the most important research of it came from Maya Guerin, who was a filmmaker, a real ahead of her time in the 40s and 50s, who went to Haiti and became an initiate. And this film, she wrote a book called The Divine Horseman that is really the track that a lot of this stuff is based on, other than Wade's information. I mean, she's really documented the ceremonies and the legba and all the meanings of what the procedures were. So when you go to a voodoo ceremony, they'd be in different kinds of situations, some as dusty and dirty and kind of frightening and real, kind of gnarly parts of the town, and then others where it'd be in more larger arenas and things where a lot of things could go on, and they were long. It was a commitment to a lot of time. You'd have to spend 6-7 hours usually in order to participate authentically.
Wow. I'm sure there's probably nothing like that in your career since in other. It sounds like it's just very immersive.
Yeah.
I meant to ask, did you guys have a lot of time in terms of prep, like to rehearse or anything like that? Because I know that Wes had brought one of the screenwriters, Richard Maxwell, to set, and from what I understand, once they got to Haiti, they felt like they had to rewrite certain things to cater to where they were now. So I'm just curious if there was much prep in terms of rehearsing and reading the script, and in terms of then maybe some of the changes that happened once you got there.
Well, yeah, there was a fair amount of time there that we had in Montjoly was the name of this kind of a restaurant hotel area that was a compound that everybody felt pretty secure in. Mm-hmm. But and then we'd make these venturing out, and then at a certain point I would just go out and go into different areas, and you realize it was not like you were filled with fear walking through the streets or anything. It was exotic and strange, and you could get fearful, but it wasn't from any external threats or anything. There was always drumming all day long. It was 24/7, up in the hills during the day, and definitely at night it just increased, and you knew that there was incredible things going on all around.
See, was that you again?
Yeah.
Did a lot of your own stunts, man.
Yeah. Well, we'd shoot them, and then, I'd say, well, let me do what I can, and then you end up using quite a bit of it, I think.
Yeah.
So.
No, I thought, I watched this again, and I thought like 99% of it was all you.
Yeah.
It definitely looks like it.
It was a tough thing. I'm just looking at all of this. I remember how Wade was always kind of like, oh, God, where are these clothes coming from? But Peter Mitchell was, he's a very interesting guy who made a lot of these shirts and things, but the basic look was Banana Republic kind of things. And and Wade didn't like it. But I remember David Ladd showed up with all these Banana Republic outfits on and everything. And it turns out they're very comfortable. They have pockets, and it ended up being the kind of thing Wade would wear,
right,
just because they were utilitarian. And at that point, Banana Republic had that kind of utilitarian base, so we used some of that, but a lot of it was constructed.
This looks very timeless to me. I think you look timeless here with this clothes. I didn't mean to ignore such a beautiful woman for so long, but I think we should talk a little bit about your co-star here. Cathy Tyson playing Marielle Duchamp, and she had just gotten a lot of accolades off of the movie Mona Lisa. I think that was right before this.
Yeah.
So what was she like to kind of just to meet and work with? Because you guys have a rapport here, and obviously eventually throughout the duration of the movie it becomes a love interest, and a lot of your decisions as a character later on are because of her. So did you have much time to get to know her before you jumped into this, or what was your relationship like?
She was very professional. She has a lot of interest in other things in life other than filmmaking. Mm-hmm. She was writing poetry at that time. I have lost track of what she's up to, and I could kind of tell that maybe she would maybe not want to continue a lot in film, and she didn't after this. I think there's a few more films, but I think she was one of those people that filmmaking can be annoying to some people who have a lot of other interests, and they feel kind of relegated to being a beautiful girl, and she had a lot going on in her brain, and didn't necessarily feel comfortable with that. Plus, she was by nature kind of a skeptic. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what this was, I think she was not a believer in a lot of this, things that were talked of, and so it made her kind of an interesting, great sense of humor in a droll, dry way.
Were you a skeptic yourself, either before or during, or were you really so open-minded to accept maybe some of this stuff?
I think because I was walking in Wade's shadow, I really was as open as I've ever been in my life.
Right.
Trying to be take him in by osmosis. I was really available to seeing and understanding what it meant to be, to look at somebody who is possessed. And I've been in ceremonies where looking right at people that you had seen behave with one set of characteristics, suddenly in possession, doing things that you wouldn't think they were capable of, and they're not performers. So it's their body changes and everything seemed to come from someplace that was not empirical. It wasn't like they were intentionally making some effect on you by changing their behavior. Something else was going on. So there was a lot to believe in that was, eye-opening.
Right. I want to talk very briefly about the look of this film. I've always appreciated the way this looked, and this was shot by John Lindley, who at the time he'd done a lot of TV work, and I think right before this he'd shot The Stepfather, which is a movie I love, but has gone on to shoot a lot of amazing work. Field of Dreams, You've Got Mail, Father of the Bride, most recently St. Vincent. So he's had an amazing career as a cinematographer, and this is kind of early on in his career. Some of my actor friends always joke with me, your best friend is the cinematographer because you want to make sure he always makes you look good. Did you interact a lot with John, and what was it like shooting the film?
Well, John is, very much a real, involved with the art of making images, and I think he's one of a DP who's very focused and quiet about how he goes about work. And I think he wanted to be kind of invisible and make it feel as much like a documentary as possible at times, so I think he didn't want me to. I didn't really need to engage with him very much about. I never wanted to kind of think about how I looked, so he never encouraged it.
Right. What about now that we're in the thick of the movie? the experience of working directly with Wes on set, because I look at your filmography and some of the directors. I mean, everybody from David Lynch to Mel Brooks to, there's so many great, interesting directors, and from what I know of their films, they're all so different in terms of their approach. So I mean, what do you remember about Wes as a director, and how does that compare to maybe experiences you've had since?
Well, I think at that point he had he had done genre movies in a way, and this was his chance of to get into something more important. And he was walking a hard walk, because there was a lot of pressure from Universal and the other producers, Rob Cohen, Keith Parrish, to make it into commercial horror picture, so they could use the Wes Craven brand. And so I think he really he wanted to make a thing that had some kind of accuracy about the ethnic, the historical nature of what we were doing. And that we ended up doing reshoots that were involved with the last quarter of the movie that probably made it more sensationalistic. And I know personally I was disappointed that we kind of went into that, but when you saw the movie, it felt like it was a real interesting thing, but two-thirds of the way through, and then it gets into a lot of mumbo jumbo and mountains of skulls and fighting and giving left hooks that take out the bad guy, and it just kind of had a dimension that Wes really tried to avoid as long as he could, but made for a movie that it had to deliver that one sheet, don't bury me, I'm not dead, and so that all those things had was a pressure to make the film into more of a genre picture than.
Right. Wes always says that he has terrible luck with endings, because the ending to almost every one of his films is somehow, because as a director, you want to make everybody happy. You have producers, you have investors, you have the studio. So it's very difficult to find that balance and make everybody happy. And I know, so for this one, he said, like most films, it's like a 3-hour cut when you put it together initially, and then you whittle it down in 90 minutes. And then I believe there were some test screenings, and that's when some additional shooting happened in Los Angeles, I think, for the third act.
Yeah.
So was that much later, after you guys wrapped this movie? Were you surprised to get called back in to reshoot some of the ending?
Yeah. It was, and it had special effects in it, so there was all of that, and it was, in those days, 87, they were pretty, there was a lot of green screen and things that, now is also old hat, but are new, never done anymore. But it was a little bit tough to get back into it. Plus, I think inherently there was a little bit of a question for me. When I look back at the movie, I was glad to get a part. I was a leading part in a movie that quickly, but it was probably available to an unknown because there's so much not bad things that happen to the character. And I think it was all these white guys making this movie who felt like they wanted to tell a story about a white guy who really learns that he doesn't know very much in the course of all of this, and has his balls nailed to a board in a chair. Was part of their, in a way, kind of self-loathing, I think, about their own centric natures, and I think they wanted to kind of cook that up, so it ends up being a character who kind of gets a little bit worked over, and in a way that if there was a different point of a different career, if you were looking to make a star vehicle, you would never tell this story that way. But it makes for interesting. There's a certain amount of truth. As a white person going into a culture like this, no matter what you're still a lot that you don't know.
Right. By the way, I love how slick Dr. Allen is in this whole scene, like the kind of game he plays with him back and forth in terms of he's trying to get the money from him to get the toxin, and here he's going to...
this is Brent. This is not Dr. Allen. That's Zakes' character. This is Brent's character.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are Dr. Allen.
I'm Dr. Allen. Yeah. Oh, you were saying... I thought you were saying... Oh, yeah.
Like right now, you're going to snip the goat on the
yeah.
foot to prove, because the next day he's going to try to bring you a new goat and say, see, he's resurrected, and you're like, I'm not falling for that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I like how slick your character is in this.
Yeah. Oh, that one. Yeah, I see. Yeah, I thought you were. I'm back on. Didn't see how that was. Yeah, that was really interesting. How much there is a lot of, it was clear that a lot of people knew the sensationalistic nature of voodoo, and they would kind of amp it up and promise a lot of things, and it was difficult to tell reality from something hyperbolic.
Right.
They love theater. I mean, they love things happening out in the street and someone grabbing attention and people being mesmerized by it. And it's a very. There is a lot of ways where you think it is a very poor country, but when you spend a lot of time there, you realize there's many people that are very, very happy people in some ways. It's perplexing because you would expect that the conditions are so extremely poor, and it's so bleak. Any attempt to reforest the hillsides, as the saplings, the little twigs are gone through within months. People go through and snap them off for firewood, and there's just seems to be no. It's that curious way in which they don't seem to be having the future in their minds, and you see relics of it as we would go and shoot in different places like this of colonial periods when different cultures would come through and try to build infrastructure, and then it'd be gone. I remember coming across a well that had been dug by American Marines in 1915 that was capable of delivering fresh water still, but had been left in disrepair, and the well that they were using was so unhygienic. It was amazing. So, lots of times people have gone in there thinking they're going to save the culture and build them up, and been frustrated by this cultural kind of resistance.
Wow.
This is an amazing scene.
Yeah, this is just beautiful
astounding.
Stuff.
Yeah, this was probably one of the most visually, ambitious, and it's just all shot at magic hour, so it was really tough to be poised in the right way. This is Lindley, John's work setting this up and getting going with Wes, and the producers. Doug Claiborne was a great producer on this, who made a lot of this stuff happen.
Right.
And David Ladd, for sure, was so important to making this movie happen.
And Rob Cohen was, I think, one of the other producers as well with David.
Yeah.
But in terms of scope, this is some of the at this point in Wes's career, this is, I think, really opening up what he could do as a director, because we'd never seen stuff like this from him before, which is just great. Yeah,
and David Nichols, the production designer, did set up all these candles, and that art department was sensational. I don't think I've ever worked with a group of people who had gone there for so many months before we got there and just immersed themselves in things and got these candles that were all handmade, and there were just thousands of them. And this legba tree, this sacred tree, it's like what a piece of genius that whole thing is. Yeah,
that whole shot, that was some beautiful poetry right there,
isn't it? Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I want to ask briefly. I need to bring up the story because I just read it and it's just so bizarre. But Wes tells a story that one of the screenwriters, Richard Maxwell, was on set pretty early on, right before shooting, and met with a voodoo priest, and I think told the priest that he was really interested in I guess being initiated into voodoo, and the priest just said, "And then you will be." And then from that moment on, apparently he kind of like disappeared. He wouldn't leave his room. Everyone started to get worried. A couple of days had gone by, and Wes, and I believe it was David Ladd, finally got him to open his door, and it was like, food all over the floor, and he was kind of in a daze, like he just wasn't himself at all. And it was really weird. They sent him back home. They're like, we got to get him out of here. Went back home. Even when he got home, he apparently didn't even recognize his wife right off the bat. And then something like 4 days later, just woke up one morning, totally fine. And the last thing he remembers is the priest saying to him, "And then you will be." So there's a whole chunk of time there where he thought he might have been, kind of under the influence. And I just read an article in Rue Morgue magazine by a gentleman named Michael Doyle that quoted saying a lot of people on this crew saw a lot of weird stuff. You were quoted as, I don't know if it's you or somebody said that you saw it, but the quote is a green cow with TV screens for eyes. Did you ever see anything like this? Let's put this rumor to bed, or
Well, there's just a lot of things that did happen, that were part of that surprising nature of what went on. And I think because Wes and David were producing, and being involved with it, I wasn't, I knew that Richard was shaky.
Right.
But I didn't know all the details at the time because they tried to keep it from most of the production team out of respect for Richard and
of course
trying to protect him. It's always a difficult thing to remove a writer, in the middle of the process. But I think it was best that I thought he went to Florida to an institution there for a little bit, but maybe that was mismemory. But he definitely was decompensating, and couldn't function. I remember, there was a lot of changes that were expected, and he'd be away, supposedly working, and come back, and he'd say, "Yeah, I got all the references when it used to be Richard, and now it's Dennis." Because they were going through the legal department, and
wow,
we realized that it was just really hard to work under that kind of at that point with his conditions, but. And yeah, I went to ceremonies where wild things happened, and it was a little, disturbing and hard to share with a lot of people who are skeptical about those kind of things, So I've always remained kind of personal about all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, now in retrospect, considering what the movie's about and what we see in it, there's a lot of amazing nightmarish sequences in it. So it's kind of just part of the lore, like, oh, there's all this crazy stuff happened while they were shooting it, and it's kind of like you feel like it influences, the actual movie itself.
Yeah.
Now, I have to bring this up. I know because this is a beautifully and artistically shot love scene, and I know a lot of actors say that this is always uncomfortable because there's tons of crew around. But I think I think Cathy's beautiful, and I think you both have a lot of chemistry here. So was this awkward, easy, interesting? How did this scene go down?
Well, it's a bit like asking a magician, to show how you do the tricks. I don't know how important that is for people. If it works cinematically, that's good. It was a difficult scene to shoot. It was really hard for Cathy, and it was uncomfortable, and there were a lot of ways in which it was not easy. It was a scene that was postponed a lot, and finally, I think postponed twice, set to do, and you get geared up for it, and then it would be pushed in the schedule, and so it was, very, very challenging. One of the more challenging sex scenes that I've been part of, anyway.
Well, I know as an actor it's hard because you have to put complete trust and confidence in the director that it's going to be done in an artistic and, non-exploitive way. And I just think this is, in terms of Wes's films, like this is a beautifully, the cave backdrop, it's a beautifully done scene. So.
Yeah, I think he achieved a lot with it. Yeah, it was good to see it put together.
Right.
It was crazy. 1 minute to be in such beauty and peace, the next surrounded.
How long has it been since you've even seen this film?
It's been, 30 years?
Since it came out.
Since it came out, yeah.
Right.
Almost 30 years, I guess. But, and I just had come across a lot of video footage that I shot and my wife shot.
Wow.
Yeah, from things that, places we went. And Wade was there with his then girlfriend, Gail Percy, who was also an anthropologist, and so we did a lot together and had a lot of both there and mostly in the. I think Gail came when we were in the Dominican, so and a lot of the things that were incredibly beautiful and mesmerizing. I remember at one footage that I had just saw. This was like a year or two ago when I pulled it out. Was digitizing this all these videos that I had in a box. And there was a long walk that I took with a guy, with the young boys that were following us, and they had a stick, and a circle of a little metal circle wheel that was probably about 3 feet in diameter. And just watching them, this simple toys, endless amount of variations of things that they could do with it. And it was really an eye-opening experience for us, and then for probably everybody involved with the film.
Wow, that's amazing. Did you make a habit of shooting your own video stuff on a lot of your productions?
Well, that was such an exotic location. I was kind of encouraged to do it. It was easy to want to do it because it was just so much was happening every day that you couldn't really feel secure you're going to remember all this stuff, And but there was a lot of companionship on it, because this is one of the few films that I know had reunions. We had 1 or 2 reunions. I can't even remember how many. There were 2, I think, where the wardrobe department and the camera department and everybody shows up, to celebrate it. So maybe there'll be a 30th anniversary. I don't know.
There should be. I think so. Really quickly, what about a lot of the effects work and stuff that you got to do? Because Wes is kind of a master of what I like to call just, camera trickery. And there's some stuff, early in the beginning of the film when you're falling down the tunnel with all the hands, and then later there's a sequence where you're kind of hallucinating and you kind of can't tell if it's upright or you're laying down in the coffin. I know Wes does a lot of tricks with revolving rooms and things like that. So do you remember at all how complicated some of the effect sequences were to shoot for this?
Well, it was always, the idea of being in a coffin and having insects put on you, it's amazing how much we did shoot that night in an actual graveyard in the Dominican Republic at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning, and actually used it. And the trick is that you have a piece of glass over your face so that the insects are put on you and they're not actually on your face. So it wasn't anything. Now it would be done entirely differently, but it was really old school, to have a piece of glass and then shoot it from the right angle and everything to sell that the actual spiders and tarantulas and everything were on me. Mm-hmm. It was, I remember that being there was kind of scary, and that it was really, to shoot that scene was scary. And then there was an unfortunate kind of like moment where Rob or somebody was, I did a practical joke on, okay, that's it, we're going to take a break, everybody walk away, and everybody walked away, and I was in the grave, which was, ha ha, but at the same time, kind of stupid.
Not very funny.
Yeah, not very funny. Yeah.
There's not much that scares me, but I think the idea of being buried alive is pretty terrifying. And this is the movie that brings it out, right into you. The idea of, because there's a sequence a little bit later when you do get poisoned, where Patriot is above you, taunting you, saying like, the American doctor's like, oh, let's wait, and he's like, no, we'll take care of it from here. And it's kind of like the camera's your POV, and he's telling you, he's like, we're going to bury you. He's like, tonight we're going to behead, we're going to behead your girlfriend's character or whatever. It's just really creepy, the idea of like you can't physically move and be in control of what's happening to you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the tarantula is like, you're getting buried alive, and you think like, oh, that's awful. And they're like, you know what? Let's put a tarantula in there too and make it twice as creepy. So I always found that sequence terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely the kind of thing that made this movie iconographic, I think, in terms of some of that, the shooting and everything. It was, and then there were things that were very, in the Amazon scene, there was a scene where I get dropped off by a helicopter pilot, and then I'm there for a long time, and then I need to be rescued and get out of there, and the helicopter's there, and I run to it, and I open the door, and the pilot's in there, and he's been dead, and there's maggots in his mouth. And we shot that with, the insect wrangler had real, these maggots with pincers and everything, and he supposedly had defanged them all. But when I got there, and this is a long setup, and this pilot was this guy, Jaime Pena, Jimmy Pineapple, and he was a short guy who had been part of the Haitian military, and I, it was long setup, long take, me running. I come to the door, I open it up, and I'm being filmed watching him while these maggots are actually biting his face. And I was, do I call cut? What do I do? And then I waited, and then I cut. Oh, thank God! Get him off! Get off here! And why didn't you just stop? You should have stopped, honey. And he goes, what? And ruin my close-up? So it was like, oh my God! Keep moving.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Give me your hand.
Man.
See your palm?
You know what? One of the things that I remember most about when this movie was released was definitely the ad campaign. The whole "Don't bury me, I'm not dead" on the posters as part of the trailer and all that. Is that the sort of thing? Like, I mean, when did you realize there's kind of a cult following for this film? Where people did people come up to you and say that line all the time or anything, or was it years later before you realized how much people really appreciated this film and performance?
Well, I started to realize it when I remember going into a jazz club in San Francisco where there were a lot of jazz musicians who were from the Caribbean and things, and realized that there wasn't, for them, this was their movie. No matter what people say about the movie, whether it was sensationalistic, and, there were American filmmakers who said, oh, you were sensationalizing voodoo to tell a commercial story. But for people from the Caribbean, they were proud that there was part of their, and they wanted it to be as sensationalistic as possible. They wanted a movie that was scary and everything else with, our typical characters and evil and all of that. So for them, this was a real achievement and acknowledgement of the exoticness of the culture. And, just the way I was treated in that jazz club was something. And then I remember somebody saying that they had sat down with Eddie Murphy at one point, and he knew all those lines of Zakes Mokae's character. Hello, Dr. Allen, and did an interview. And I thought, wow, this is, they're just certain strata of people who just thought this was cool movie and important movie.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, he went on to do, Eddie Murphy did Vampire in Brooklyn with Wes. So I can imagine him having that conversation and doing those lines from this.
Yeah,
so it's pretty funny.
Yeah,
it's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, what stands out, and what stands out for you in terms of this whole experience? It's a very unique period in Wes's career. I think it's very interesting and unique in your filmography again, because you were, kind of primarily on a comedy path, and then this was a nice little diversion from that. And since then, you've done a lot of, interesting, diverse things. So, how do you look back on it in terms of your career? Well,
I look back at it. I made a great friend in Wade, and have continued to be, good friends. And he's such an interesting guy, and his whole worldview and everything is, so potent. And as a photographer, he's extremely good. And, just those kind of things, when you go through a process like this and you actually keep a good friend or two. And David Ladd also remains a good friend. And I'm very cordial with everybody and really enjoy whenever we see him, because it's almost like, we went through boot camp together or something when you see Wes and any of these other people that were involved in the movie. And you did something special that, didn't, and I've done other interesting movies, but this really takes the cake in terms of exoticness, for sure.
Right. I think we need to organize that third reunion at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's time.
Well, thank you very much for this chance to comment on this much of the movie. I have to take off. Today's the last day before I go to set tomorrow in New Mexico, so I gotta rock and roll, but good to talk to you, Rob.
Excellent. Great. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
I like it.